Hello, dear listener and esteemed followers of Semiotic Circle of Turkey. I wish you all a good evening. First of all, I would like to start with a brief commemoration speech. 2 years ago, on February 6th, 2023, we experienced one of the most devastating disasters in the history of Turkey. Yesterday was the second anniversary of this immense tragedy. On this occasion, on behalf of Semiotic Circle of Turkey, I respectfully honor the memory of those who lost their lives, and extend my deepest sympathies to all who were affected. I sincerely hope for a future where the necessary precautions are taken to prevent similar tragedies, ensuring a safer and healthier world for all people. Tonight, I warmly welcome you all to the talk titled The Semiotic of Umberto Eco with Professor Dr. Buyar Hoca. This talk is organized as a part of the 2025 events of Semiotic Circle of Turkey. Together, we will embark on an interesting journey into the semiotic of Umberto Eco. First of all, I would like to introduce myself briefly. My name is Yakup Yeşilyaprak. I work as an assistant professor in the field of classical Turkish literature at Ardahan University. Dear Professor Buyar Hoca, thank you so much for accepting to join us for this talk.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am sorry about my very poor Turkish. However, I will be speaking in English, of course. It's my honor to be a member of the Türkiye Gösterce Bilim Çevresi. I'm very happy about it. I'm also happy about knowing in person Professor Doğan Cüney since 2013. He gave me compliments about my Turkish, but I still don't believe it. He was an immense person. He was a very good writer. And we all do remember him for very good works he had, very good deeds. I'm really proud to have known him in person. I can say even my speech at that time at the Çankaya University in Ankara was very fruitful. My collaboration with all your Turkish colleagues was very fruitful. I want to thank all of them who helped me. I have done my very best to assist them as well to my knowledge of semiotics. I was grown up as a philologist. My department is English and Italian language since I was a student. My master degree is in the field of comparative literature at the University of Zagreb in Croatia. And my PhD is exclusively on Umberto Eco. Since one of my teachers firstly mentioned the term semiotics, I never got stuck of it more than 25 years.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us again. We feel really lucky to have the opportunity to discuss such an important but also complicated and challenging topic as the semiotics of Umberto Eco with someone like you who has spent many years in this field and has written some very important works about the topic.
Thank you
Welcome
so much.
to our broadcast. Now, I would like to briefly present the resume of Professor Dr. Buyar Hoca. Buyar Hoca is a full professor of communication sciences at the Southeast European University in Titovo and Skopje, North Macedonia. His teaching courses include communication theory, introduction to communication sciences, and semiotics of mass communication. His main scientific interests are structural semiotics, semiotics of passions, semiotics of disabilities, and existential semiotics. He gained his PhD from the University of Skopje in 2008 on the semiotics of Umberto Eco. Out of his creative and intellectual work, one can number two published novels a book, as well as several scientific articles published in prestigious scientific journals. Now, I would like to mention some of his works. Semiotics of Precision and Imprecision, Multilingualism and Sameness versus Otherness in a Semiotic Context, on the applicability of the semiotics of passions and the science behavior in autistic children, semiotics of an unspoken language, Umberto Eco's semiotics, theory, methodology, and poetics. These were the works of some of the works of Professor Dr. Buyar Hoca. As you can see, we are together with a scholar who has extensive experience in the field of semiotics. If you have anything to ask, please feel free to put your question as a comment. I will ask them after the presentation. Now, dear professor, if you feel ready, we eagerly look forward to hearing your words on the semiotic theory of Umberto Eco.
Thank you very much, Professor Yeşil Parmak. It's again, I repeat, it's my very big honor of being a part of this scientific circle, and my history of knowing Umberto Eco's work dates a long time ago. Of course, in 1997, I was proud to have translated one of his greatest works, Sei passeggiate dei boschi narrativi, 6 walks at the fictional woods, which were lectures in English language at the University of Harvard at 1994, and then again retranslated in the Italian. I have to say that his multifariousness, his overall creation, did not stop only on a certain topic. Maybe it is for this reason that Eco is divided in so many fields, as I would dare say. Not only theory, not only, we have to say that he was grown as a philosopher before. Above all things, his thesis was on the aesthetics of Tom Aquinas, as you know. So we are in the Middle Ages, and it is one of the most difficult, I would say, fields which scholars of semiotics had touched upon ever, because of its development since very, very early stages. And I'm also, as Professor Tarasti told me once, that I have known John Deel in person in 1998. I was young at that time, not anymore, but it was my beginnings on semiotics, of course. On the other hand, we were all grown up by the linguistics of science. Once semiotic was mentioned, Ferdinand de Saussure came into our minds, and later on we came to understand its philosophical backgrounds, which is also important. But also, as you know, more recently from the Tartu Moscow School, with Professor Kalevi Kul from the universities in Estonia, which I'm proud of knowing himself in person. He also the biosemiotics as a problem, a very difficult problem, I would say, of our biological functioning was developed as well. So, although so many fields at the same time, one of the few intellectuals of the past century who succeeded in developing a general theory of semiotics among few people was Umberto Eco. I would say one of the best intellectuals of the previous century, maybe together with Noam Chomsky. I have not any clue to compare all of them, as a matter of fact, but they were individualistically minded, as all academicians and intellectuals should be. Now, let me stick myself into my lecture. You know that I gave you a paper. I have entitled it From the Code Theory to the Interpretation Process. Why did I say that? Because there is no other way. I say here that I have divided his theory in 2 main totalities, because it's no other way of understanding Umberto Eco if you don't divide them all and put them all in their due places, either semiotically speaking, linguistically speaking, psychologically speaking, or philosophically speaking. So not only one, how shall I say, scientific field was touched upon at once, but many of them. It is for this reason that we consider him one of the fathers of semiotics, maybe together with Charles Sanders Peirce, and maybe together with other masters, if you allow me to say, such as Aldiger, Julien Greimas, etc., Yuri Lotman, who contributed so much to the field. Again, one part of his contribution, therefore, has been dedicated to what we call semiotics proper. It is for this reason that I start from the coding and encoding processes. Another part is methodological, either claiming to depend on something that we call a general division of science, such as we see from John Poisnot, such as we see from the Middle Ages, from the 3rd century to the 13th, as a matter of fact, as John Dewey says in his 4 Ages of Understanding, and from the 13th century to the 17th, since empiricism appeared, I would say post-René Descartes period. Then again, semiotics became, in inverted commas, famous among academicians. It was exactly Eco that combined a way of all what philosophy had to say about semiotics. It is for this reason that, how shall I say, his works were enormously important for what we are doing, actually. If I said that I divide them in 2 big groups, it means that one cannot fully analyze all of his work either in one paper on a single monograph. It is impossible, simply, because he is an ocean. We are just dots, small dots in all that ocean that Umberto Eco gave to semiotics, as a matter of fact. I shall therefore stick to, as much as this lecture can allow, or the paper that I've written, to the theory of semiotics. Its original name is Trattato di Semiotica Generale in 1975. In 1975, and the translation in English is in, as you can see, 1976. 6 books in the narrative voice, which I was happy to have translated into my mother tongue, Albanian. The role of the reader, which I hope you all know. The original is Lector in fabula la cooperazione con il lettore, the cooperation with the reader. And finally, the open work, one of his masterpieces, Opera Aperta, initially published in 1962. The question arises, why did I choose exactly these works and not others? We are aware of the semiotics and the philosophy of language. We are aware of his works on the medieval philosophy, such as Sul pensiero medievale, on the medieval thought, 2010, such as his narrative works. In my own monograph, I have called his contribution to science and art a double discourse. It's also semiotic. He writes novels like a semiotician. And that's the most important issue, a most important entity to know about Umberto Eco. So, what are the most significant matters that I have emphasized? The narrative process and the text as semiotic entities as seen in Eco's understanding. So, what did he gain as a result? Exactly the narrative procedures, which, how shall I say, emerged from the semiotic method. Either from the encoding and decoding processes, like I said, are very important in his terminology, not only, but his theory, after all. And what I have named Eco's theory, exactly because he decomposes various literary and artistic tools, but also belonging to human everyday interactiveness, into tinier elements. That is what is semiotics about processing, how to decompose them and reunite them again. If you reunite them, and you know it much better than me, we call it a process of semiosis. It is even in the times of Charles Sanders Peirce. So what he meant was disclosing metaphoricity. What does the metaphor mean? He has more than 500 pages, I would say, written only on this term. And you know that much better than me. Implicitness instead of explicitness. We might as well, in everyday speech, use metaphoric expressions, which was one of the discoveries in 1983 of Roman Osipovich Jakobson, let us say, with his language functions. However, he just meant to tell which is the root of all of that. Where did it come from? And it is exactly, precisely semiotics that tells us about that. Interpreting, of course, which I have divided, as you will see, from the course of uniting determined components in semiotics, such as early structuralism used to say, I can instance Samuel Chetman, but not only, starting from Ferdinand de Saussure, Martinet in linguistics, etc., Edward Sapir, who have done similar divisions into langue and paroles, speech and language, as a matter of fact. However, of course, one cannot detailedly explicate in a short time all of these elements. Let us not forget that narration theory today is a whole theory. You can structurally minded people can analyze it. However, logically minded people can as well. But also in recent time, existential semiotics created by Professor Eero Tarasti, who I'm honored to mention. He followed me for the last 20 years. And there are existential narratives, as a matter of fact, deriving or emerging from the philosophy of post-18th century, of post-Hegelian philosophy. So I have tried to stick on the most important or significant matters created by Umberto Eco in the field of semiotics. And these are, every one of us will admit this, the communication process, the code notion, and later the signification notion. The three items, very important, I would say, which theoretically create what we call theoretical semiotics today, what we call a theoretical paradigm, as a matter of fact. We are in an attempt to seek for the knowledge and process science. That is our job. So to explicate his labyrinth, as he called himself, of writing, or his semiotic intrusion in almost life spheres and art generally, one must clarify which elements, of course, construct such a semiotic process. So what I mean by intrusion in inverted commas, I have metaphorically used this term. It means that semiotics can analyze each and every life sphere. It depends on the approach. It depends on the interpretation possibilities of the semioticians. After all, as Jacobson would say, the final meaning choice is ours. So what we are trying to do is a generation of meaning. Science definitions, after all, in Eco are given by way of encoding and decoding processes. Initially, of course, taken from the perspective of mathematical and exact sciences, such as in the case, say, of classical communication theories, Shannon and Weaver, who examined the circuits, the channels of technological, at that time, tools, analogical, I might say, not like today, in the sense that we are transmitting directly the speech. It was almost impossible in Shannon and Weaver's time, but they were people who would, how shall I say, physically decode a sound, whether the sound is clear or it has physical problems. To me, it concurs with a physical channel in Roman Osipovich Jakobson, but I might leave that topic later for discussion. So, if I say communication, of course, not only did communication cover various disciplines, as we are all witnesses of, that larger grew into new or later reshaped scientific discussable matters, but it also covered matters exclusively characteristic of human nature in terms of our psychophysical development, such as in the case of perception, cognition, and sensation notions. Why do I mention these three notions? Exactly because of the 20th century's appearance in semiotics. And you know much better than me that also Pierre Giraud and Ferdinand de Saussure called it semiology, not semiotics. The problem was the conventionality of the sign, as I hope to be able to explain to you. Which earlier on, so in the past centuries of the development of the method itself, it relied on the distinction between natural and cultural phenomena, starting from Aristotle and Plato until today. So we all communicate to survive, to render the meaningfulness of our reciprocal interactiveness, to understand our multi-phased functionality properly. So there is not only one way of human functioning. it is also with the rest of the living beings, or Lebenswelt, as John Dee calls them. To me, the relatedness of each sign among each other, the interpersonal sort of communication, is above all more important, so that semiotics could share it, could distribute it, could compound it in meaningful units. It is the meaning that we are, of course, searching in this. So even our nervous system interacts uninterruptedly, commonly in the shape of transmission of signals, messages, to make us biologically functional subjects. And why do I say this? I say this because of the fact that even neurobiology, with the transmission of the right signals coming from different parts of our brains, are interactive with our physicality. Our inner world, or the one, if you want, that belongs to the unconsciousness, develops independently from our minds. To me, this is the distinction or distinguishability between what philosophy, I will say now, not semiotics, because it was this term, as you know, was coined by John Locke later, uh, distinguished among various types of science. What was naturally created by God's will, and what was humanly created, what we consciously create. And that's why I said at the other lecture at the University of Coimbra in Portugal, when I spoke of the semiotics of the performance art, that it depends on us, on our consciousness, cognition, and perception, how will we react to certain interactive behaviors. Now, science and communication, of course. Not only semiotician gave the term sign its definition, and we don't have a reason to remember them all. But however, when I said natural science, which was done in the past, I mean the first regards the relation between our organic functionality. It's strange because it's a will of God, independently function, that is excluding our consciousness or intentional functioning. That was from the same time of Aristotle, Plato, and the others. And the next one regards the signification process, deriving from our behavior, conceptualizing things and phenomena, therefore being of a philosophical and logical origin. It means that the development, the psychophysical growth of human behavior enhanced science behavior in the most of the different ways. It is for this reason that semiotics can speak of fictive realities, as a matter of fact, and accepts and avoids, in such cases, as I have said in my semiotics of precision and imprecision, the precision in the determination of the correct material transmitted to the other, or as we say communicationally, on the other side of the communication channel. So the first one regards definitional matters, because we have definitions since that time. It was not called semiotics. Maybe it was called interpretation theory. Umberto Eco, in his Limits of Interpretation in 2001, says since the 2nd century after Christ. Whereas the second one regards relational and methodological matter. And this regards the natural and cultural science divisions, to my modest opinion, because of the fact that it was the cultural conventionalities were created by the growth of the human culture and civilization, as a matter of fact. One of such concerns, one of such, I do not want to use the word imposed, but intentionally made conventionalities in semiotics, was the code theory, above all. It was almost, as much as I have read, except for Pierre Giraud, who also distinguished logical codes, it was Umberto Eco almost exclusively who dedicated many pages to this problem. And I also done the same thing in my monograph. Many have asked me why. The reason is because I wanted to touch the originating grounds of either human or non-human interaction, if I can use this word, either in the straightforward or metaphorical sense of the word. So it does not regard only rigorous sciences, as it was initially conceived, for instance, by Shannon and Weber in 1948, a mathematical theory of communication, and many authors at that time, I would say, not only analogical technology, but also the digital one. But it concerns humanities, almost each life sphere. So the codes theory is a part of communication sciences in general, but it may be exclusive in some instances, and that is what also in 1995 L'uomo di supermassa, I think, was his book, and La comunicazione in massa, human, superhuman, or superhuman and mass communication. Maybe I did not translate it like it should. When he used to talk about mass media, digital occurrences, etc., when he really did this, how shall I say, divisions among human interactiveness and what is really communication, or if you want, in the narrowest sense of the word, pure semiotics. So we have either inclusivity or exclusivity of this notion in the semiotic theories themselves, I dare say, in plural. So not only have classical communication processes or paradigms, you would say, been overcome in Eco's theory, but they have also been revisited for a semiotic process. To me, his discovery lies exactly on this, because imagine in 1968, when he produced his La struttura assente, the absent structure, there was not such a thing as, how shall I say, semioticizing the situation, rendering human feelings passionate, like it was in 1993 by Aldiger Julien Gray-Mas and Jacques Fontany. Of course, we have to be aware of these things. It is for this reason, therefore, that they also have been revisited for semiotic processes. I say it means that a semantic feature, a meaning feature, has been added, including a semiotic process. So, why do I reconfirm this several times? I hope that my internet is not gone. No, it's good.
No, there is no.
No. Why do I reconfirm this? Exactly because of the meaning feature adding. So when we talk about meaning, we talk about semiotics, but not as a ready given result. As a ready given result, it's the philosophy of language, it's linguistics. You have the dictionaries. For example, you have so many words in Turkish to say wonderful. We don't have them. That's semantic field, as a matter of fact. But semioticians discuss how do we come to that semantic field. It's different. It's not the same. So the code theory, the second code functions, we are aware of the fact that in Umberto Eco there are at least 4 functions of the codes. Eco argues the meaning features addition in the first place, and the second, there is a physical and semiotic information distinguishability in Eco's understanding. What does it mean? That the word information can be conceptualized or understood in many of its meaning and of its underprints. We can call information something that we listen or see on the TV. We can call information something that somebody informs us. By a semiotic information, we understand something that has to be further processed. So semiotic information is the information ready to be processed for further procedures that render it semiotic in the sense of inducing or deducing meaning. In other words, the aim is to render, generate, induce, depending on the approach, or deduce meaning. I have mentioned the word meaning for the very fact, if the time is flowing, please interrupt me, for the very fact that it is exclusive with most of the communication process. Shannon and Weaver says, we are interested in the sound, high fidelity of sound, not in the meaning of the message. It is for this reason that they were interested in mathematical and physical formulas. They wanted to show us mathematically how, for instance, this transmission of ours comes through. On the other hand, semiotics tells us, what do we process prior to our speech? Is there any preparatory stage prior to my speaking? Any brain activities prior to the actual verbal expression? Imagine, for instance, my autistic son who cannot speak, but he processes the information that cannot be expressed full. So semiotics, in the case of autism and other similar diagnoses, remains a fact which confirms a meta-communicational status. So messages are not really processed. That's why I says that semiotics begins in terms of the relatedness of signs, as John Dewey says, because each sign is related to each other. Their ability to combine. We combine them because we can encode them several times. How do we render metaphors? How do we render allegories in arts? And finally, their ability to signify. We must choose which meaning we shall regard as final. Nothing is final in semiotics, as a matter of fact. The interpretability is endless, as earlier philosophical studies used to teach us. One should not finally doubt that such interpretation, besides fundamental sign functions, which is similar to Ferdinand de Saussure, 1916, Jean Piaget. When Jean Piaget speaks of the early child developmental stages and the moment when the child will begin to speak, he speaks of the preparatory stage, which I told you about. He says, when the child will have symbolic picture in inverted commas of what he thinks, he will start to think. And I will call that function a basic semiotic function. He even says that I am hiring this term from the linguist. Of course, at that time we knew of structuralism, basically, which were fashionable, I would say, such as Cours de linguistique générale, etc. At that time, from Ferdinand de Saussure. For this reason, I call these functions basic semiotic functions. Besides fundamental sign functions, which Eco showed in the coding and decoding process, which is a part of Eco's comprehension of the semiotic method in the first place. In the second, if we talk about interpretation, of course, we speak of a complex semiotic function. I have named it so. I don't know whether it's true or not, but I have called it a complex semiotic function. Why do I say this? I will explain it later again in the conclusion, but I will say to you now in one sentence, because once we combine two or more elements, structuralism used to say two, Per says three, you know that. Firstness, secondness, thirdness. How do we come to the final meaning? Only if a third, a fourth, or a fifth comes into discussion. It is for this reason that Greimas calls them sems or sememas, as Umberto Eco says in his book. I will return to that problem again. Now, a little bit more about the interpretation. So, Eco codes functions definitions, the four main ones, as you know, which compare human interactive statuses with technology, with machines, entail multiple possibilities for the meaning choice. In that case, they can overcome the dual or dyadic view of semiotic phenomena that early structuralism used to foresee. So it's not only the black against the white. Not only can this be done in rigorous sciences, I say as explained in Eco because he takes examples from technical sciences, but it can also be, of course, in arts and humanities. Eco's merit, in my opinion, lies precisely in the following issue. He connects both mentioned fields through the code's function. Because in the third and fourth function, he entails meaning seeking. That is semiotics, in other words. By interpretation, here we mean more than one obtained meanings or reshaping it after all. When I want to interpret something, I reshape it. I reshape it because I want to filter it. I want to say it otherwise. Also in the syntax in English language, for example, you don't have such possibilities such as you might have of the ones that are more morphologically developed, such as Hungarian, Turkish, Finnish. You have 10 ways of saying the same thing, for example. And it is one of Umberto Eco's works on the translation dire quasi la stessa cosa, saying almost the same thing. He talks of translation in the metaphoric sense of the word. Not only is language translatable, but each one of our activities translatable into something else. And the sign is said to represent something else. As a matter of fact, it is Charles Sanders Peirce's semiotic paradigm. So, like I said, by interpretation here we mean more than one meaning. It is for this reason that the interpretation, as a matter of fact, is practically endless. However, what I've said once, I think I can repeat it now. How do we stop this chain of interpretation? Well, the judge Julian Greimas has said himself when he generates meaning, he uses the deduction theory. The chain of trajectories developed by certain formulas in order to extract, if I can say so, the right meaning of a word, of a phenomenon, or an analyzing subject. How do we say that Iago was a bad man in Shakespeare? Because he all the time he tries destroying Othello because of jealousy his wife is a victim. We do not understand these relations initially in the Shakespearean tragedy, for instance, because they are exposed as ranked in the army at the expositional stage of the play by William Shakespeare. We understand them later because of relational attitudes. That is what I mean by interpretation. Even Jacques Fontanier and Greimas go further that call them passions. Passions because I wouldn't like to do something. These are modalities. And by those modalities, this sort of desires in inverted commas produce passionate, meaningful units. Some of them are realistic, some of them are imaginative, if we talk naturally about the field of arts. So I believe that Eco has combined some scientific approaches to make life and artistic phenomena visible, accountable, and analyzable by semiotics. It means, by the word, that semiotics borderlines become limitless. Although you know that in his theory of semiotics, he has distinguished the upper and the lower threshold of semiotics, but semiotics is the process, as a matter of fact. Interpretation is semiotics in the extent it can be semiotics, or in other words, in the extent that it can be interpreted. Otherwise, it is a part of philosophy. How do we stop this? Juridical sciences must interfere because it is endless. The one who has mistakenly interpreted something has to be punished. There is no other way. That is why Jacobson says that the final meaning choice is ours, because it's an endless trajectory of meaningful, also meaningless chains of trajectories, how shall I say, for example, in Greimas. What we do as semioticians, we select them, which suits to us better. We remove the redundant features we do not necessarily have a necessity at the moment. So, in other words, they regard both real life and cultural phenomena. If they are real life, they were definitionally established long time ago. If they are cultural, they are conventional, because it is a sort of convention. It is to understand, finally, that interpretation as a philosophic phenomenon entails Eco's known world of possibilities, or as he says, possible worlds, which regards his legacy to Charles Sanders Peirce. His definition in this sense of the word is each one of us has his or her own world. If I try to expose or impose my own world to the other, will the other believe me? No, because it is my own. It is a part of my own life interests and fantasies, which are not practically convenient, suitable, how shall I say, for the other. But it is a world, and it has a meaning for me. In other words, it is a semiotics based on interpretational grounds. That's why it is based on the theory of possibilities, and as you know better than me, Charles Sanders Peirce was a mathematician, a physician, a metaphysician above all, and then belonged to the pragmaticist school. So post-Descartesian philosophy, as I said, after maybe don't take my word for granted, 8th or 9th century, it's a gap that was, according at least to John Dewey, to the various semiotic paradigms and traditions. The second part of my paper is about narration. Why did I mention it? Because structuralism mentioned it, because it can exemplify it, because it is also based on the coding and decoding theories according to Umberto Eco, and finally because Eco dedicated many pages also to his artistic production. Let's mention but a few. For example, The Name of the Rose, which was later also transformed into a film by Sean Connery as the main protagonist, The Foucault's Pendulum, uh, The Mystery of the Queen Luana, which is a very interesting novel, but all of these include the narration component. We must all agree to that. And that sort of narration belongs both to the modern and the postmodern. This does not intend a literary critic, as a matter of fact, because a literary critic can see the character's development, etc. We see here the communication process accomplished through the science. And that is why one time of flow is interrupted by the other, if you have noticed in Eco's novel. So in the instance of Eco, narration as a component is used to describe and interpret artistic creations above all, which are complex in their semiotic understanding, either because of their decomposing in tinier units or because of juxtaposing components to aim to create a totality, say for instance a text. Why do I mention the text here? First, because I do not fragmentize it. I understand it in the Roland Barthian sense, as a totality. If you understand it as a totality, you create narrative structures. And those narrative structures should be in a relation with other narrative structures in order to extract meaning. So, through coding and decoding theory, I would say structuralism was a sort of, in narration, transitory period in Eco. In his later production, he almost stick to philosophy, which is logical. His original provenience is philosophical. I say in this sense of the word, in order to produce later interpretation. If Saussure's semiotics focused mainly on binary analysis, it did not mean that entities always represented a relation, a semiotically relevant matter, because it is a process. It is a process which constantly grows up. What matters instead in semiotics is the combination of the two. Either langue and parole, as Saussure would say, or say an image as compared with linguistic nomination or nomenclature, a word with its meaning, or a word taken from a linguistic viewpoint with another meaning, the one that someone would only refer to, but not visualizing it. In structuralism, such pairs or items or entities create a relation. This is the most important word here, I would say, in terms of the structural method, because of the fact that two components, such was the discovery, let's say, in earlier 20th century linguistics, two only elements were compared. You know that Peirce was much earlier reacted. His philosophy, we are familiar with his philosophy much earlier than Ferdinand de Saussure. However, semiologically, and this is a difficult question, problems in semiotics define mostly human relationships, and I say this sentence with a little bit of fear, rather than other cultural or non-human phenomena, such as logics or philosophy did in the past. And if you combine the two, you see that the two juxtaposed components in the structural and post-structural period would not suffice. You need a third, which is Peirce, but you need a fourth, a fifth, which is the modern philosophical study today. And of course, it concurs with semiotics. There is no word. As Eco says, and this is purely structural, I would say, definition. A sign function is realized when the two functives, it's the famous one of course, expression and content enter into mutual correlation. The same functive can also enter into another correlation, thus becoming a different functive, therefore giving rise to a new sign function. So the expression and content plane, I will remind you on Semio Chatman, discourse and story. In later Umberto Eco's sei passeggiate nei boschi narrativi, six walks on the fictional wood, fabula intreccio, contents and form, which is I guess a structurally minded feature coming also from early Russian formalism before the discoveries of Ferdinand de Saussure, such as Viktor Shokolsky, for example, in linguistics. Then when they said that they could read poetry in pictures. It was a discovery at that time, but not today. And we can read poetry in so many ways, of course. Not only does this create a semiotic relation, like we said, a relation as intended in the above echo citation, or in the structural sense of the word, but it also refers to the interpretation of an artwork, in case determined theoretical tools combine to reach a particular goal. What I want to say is the following. These two oppositional relations grew into something new. And that something new is interpretation, as a matter of fact. It is that for this reason that one can derive or deduce or induce more than one meaning. And that's a problem for the semiotician, because the semiotician has to choose when does it come interpretation. The truth is that besides what has been mentioned above, the meaning can also be inferred or abducted, as Peirce says. And let us remind ourselves that Peirce has exactly the inductive method based on the association, psychological and logical. It is so because the more a single time flow of events that occurs in a work, as long as it may last, another one can become a part of the main text. Through another text, another time, a new sort of flow of events. So, not that the same one is recyclated, but it's reshaped. That is what we call interpretation. And it's not new. Arthur Schopenhauer used to say this. Artistic categories are being constantly repeated, but not a category is the same like the other one. That is why a simple, let us say, in the musical score, a simple ritardando change in the musical score by the composer, played by the artist, is not a mistake. It expresses the uniqueness of artistic expression. But not every artist can do it. That is another problem when we talk about performative art. So I conclude that two contradicted items, like early structuralism used to say, would not suffice. For this reason, Eco names or defines the different types of authors and readers, such as the modal author, such as the empirical author, one who has the competence of reading a work of art, one who has the competence, I would be encouraged to say a semiotic competence in this instance, because it uses semiotically tools to enhance artistic reading, as a matter of fact. So the aim is the encyclopedic knowledge, as Umberto Eco says. That's what he calls important, which each of them must possess, of course, in the metaphorical sense of the word. In his Semiotics and Philosophy of Language, he says, besides the dictionaries that various languages have, together with their meanings, of course, there is something that we call totality or categories in philosophy. And you can find out their meanings, that outcome, exactly from encyclopedic competence. That for this reason, he says that each one of us has an encyclopedia of its own, otherwise a cultural convention, a competence to state things and analyze various phenomena, not similar with Chomsky's competence and performance. He meant for the language acquisition that is definitely something else, because we talk of generation at that instance, of deducing, not of inducing. Finally, when we talk of the encyclopedic knowledge, this is the instance in which, as Eco says, interpretation becomes an integral part of the semiotic process because of its multifariousness. And that was a sort of a revival or a coming back of philosophy into semiotics, if you allow me to say that. because the semantic field, the meaning field, is rooted on the philosophy of languages, on the logics of them. In a metaphoric way, I say if you play chess, you first think of it. It's psychology. After you have played a certain combination, it's logic, because that is finished, and you leave your the other side to react. So once our thinking processes are accomplished, they rely on the theory of probability. That is what Charles Sanders Peirce, as a matter, talked about. Which possibility you would like to choose, or which competence do you have, as Umberto Eco says, encyclopedic in his terms, to analyze a certain semiotic phenomenon. After all, interpretation must rely on something. Ogni processo di comunicazione si basa su un processo di significazione. Each communicational process is based on a signification process. Why does he say that? Because each sort of signification for us has a meaning, even though it may be not realistic. But it is a meaning. It is semiotics, as a matter of fact. After all, as we are attempting to demonstrate the above assertions practically, how can one call resulting entities final in semiotics after whichever semiotic process has been accomplished? The process has finished. You came to the destination. You extracted the meaning of the word, of a phenomenon, etc., etc. Is it final? No. Am I sure that Hamlet was afraid of his mother? Because of what? What did he feel in the past? How can I interpret it? That's why Eco says, artistic works have their indetermination. They are not determined. I am free to interpret it otherwise. Professor Jerzy Laprak is free to interpret it otherwise. And it is not a mistake in semiotics. It should only rely to a signification process. So, I will finish soon. I hope that I'm not annoying you.
No
All
problem.
interpretations are possible on the one hand, including their diversity, because none of them is similar to the other. But not all interpretations are semiotically relevant. If we talk Edward Hirsch, I mentioned it, the limits of interpretation. I said it's endless. It is endless because not each interpretation is logical. If it's not logical, it is not semiotic. It is semiotic if it relies on a signification process. And the signification process is a process after all. It is not something that we consider as already given semantic units, but we consider that the processes are done in the field when something is, how shall I say, is extracted as a result, the one that we choose. It is for this reason that, the famous Umberto Eco sentence that semiotics is a science about lying. He was right. Why do I lie? Because I speak metaphorically. Because my messages are encoded. And you should decode them. That's what we call the process. So I intend, therefore, by a complex semiotic function, I return to the topic that I promised you a moment before, the instances when the meaning cannot be immediately disclosed, or better expressed, when one needs to decode an entity more than once. Do we have such cases? Of course we do. Do we have misunderstandings when we talk among each other? Of course we do. I see now the recent social media, for example, the Facebook. So many times my friends misunderstand me. And I tell them, call me on the phone. Tell me your direct message because I'm not able to understand you. It means the message should be interpreted once more in order to get the right meaning. So it regards situation when the semiotic object, as Greimas says, is not instantly visible or decodable. Naturally, if it's not decodable, you cannot obtain the wished results. By the process of signification, therefore, Umberto Eco means, including a third component, such as given by the definitions of Charles Sanders Peirce that he gave to the semiotic studies. So understanding the science as an index, icon, and symbol, or the firstness, secondness, and thirdness, which are, of course, related, I say, by way of induction, associations, coming from the term to index to the term of symbols, or as Umberto Eco says, overcoding the message, or the S code, as he names it in his Trattato Generale di Semiotica in 1975. So it is finally to remark, as also Deary claims in 2001, that Eco's legacy to Charles Sanders Peirce, and structuralism, of course, analogously, is due to the conventional nature of science, as well as to the cultural phenomena as opposed to the natural ones, which definitionally, since the prime developments of semiotics, entail the sign and its meaning outcomes, as Deary and Eco both says. The division in natural and conventional and cultural science is very interesting, also because of the appearance of the prime developments of the 20th century in terms of Ferdinand de Saussure, Roland Barthes, Pierre Giraud, etc., that called semiology the field, not semiotics, which derives from John Locke, etc. However, combining the two is not at all a mistake. And also my speech in Portugal was that semiotics needs a methodology. What I mean by methodology, giving its theoretical prime its due place in order to avoid the right proportion of the transmitted material. We transmit material, we transmit contents in our speech, but we transmit contents in art, but we transmit concepts that there are social conventions. The social conventions exist because we have established them by an unwritten agreement. Ferdinand de Saussure told us that there is a written agreement about each language usage. You can use the words that are in a dictionary, no more, because no one will understand you. And that is what Ludwig Wittgenstein talked about in his logical and philosophical tractatus. Because of the fact you have to convince, it is again a communicational problem, as also Aristotle and Plato would say, the audience, the people, that you use this word. You don't use another word, so as to be understood by the others. The multifariousness and diversity of approaches are reality in semiotics. We cannot deny or contradict none of them. On the contrary, I say we should use them. If possible, we should combine them. However, it is also true that, on the other hand, if only one theory or paradigm were in question, or a methodological way of analysis, then semiotics would not be as interdisciplinary, as omnipresent, almost in all life spheres as it is today. It is for this reason that semiotics expresses its multidimensionality. I would never say that it's one single aspect. And for the end, I can say that in my semiotics of performing arts, I talked about several artistic, literary, theatrical, and musical works, and I said one way of analysis is not enough. If you talk about the passions, the trajectory of the semiotic squares of various characters, you did not come to the final meaning. Add to that theory either the coding or decoding one, or after all, the transcendental philosophy of Eero Tarasti, whose communicational process is very interesting because it's not classical. There is an intervention, as he says in German, by the Dasein, by the being, which intervenes between our beings and the subjects. In arts, the subjects leads the way, the semiotic way. And we talk of objectified realities, as Bourdieu would say. Objectified reality is something which is not objective, but it is subjectively created. It is for this reason that I don't want to spread myself to enter into philosophy, that John Dewey talks about subjectivity, but intrasubjectivity, but as well about suprasubjectivity. I think that I cannot cover in one single speech the whole of Umberto Eco. If you have questions, please do follow. Once again, I apologize for my poor knowledge of the Turkish language, but I promise one day maybe I will be able to speak also about science in Turkish. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, dear professor. I think your Turkish is very good, and if you want, you can say something to our Turkish audience.
I will say only two words.
Your Turkish band.
Çok sayın ve kıymetli hocalar, size sonsuz teşekkürler. Benim yeterli olmayan Türkçemle.
Uh,
Herkese çok başarılar ve yeni yayınlar diliyorum. I think I didn't make any mistake.
no, your Turkish is very good, and I think our audience will agree with me. I have some
Yeah,
questions, if you don't mind. I
of
think
course.
time. We don't have any limit for time. I will ask you a question. I think my question will be related to the your last sentences. You spoke about interdisciplinary, and my question will be related to this. Um, in A Theory of Semiotics, Umberto Eco states that he aims to construct a general semiotic theory. Do you think he succeeded in establishing a general semiotic theory? If so, how? If not, why? Do you think the concept, a complex semiotic function, can be a key factor to establish a general semiotic theory, which can be applied to almost all disciplines or fields? Uh, I know a complex semiotic function is your concept. How can
Yes.
you relate them?
Thank you very much for your question. The question you posed to me, of course, is not easy, and my answer is yes and no. I will tell you why yes. Because starting, as I said, from the coding and decoding processes, starting from the informational theories, uh, Umberto in 1975 was, I think, 50 years old, and he decided to make up this theory with classical theories. What I intend to say, at that time, he tried to manage the boundaries of limits of semiotics. Yes, because coding and decoding meant a unification of certain formal aspects of the objects discussed. And he managed in this. However, later, when he talks about sign definitions, etc., and the cultural object of semiotics, he, of course, reaches to the interpretation point. However, as John Dealey would say, why sticking only on the cultural phenomena? And I would say more yes than no. My answer is, if you want my personal answer, is yes, he reached, because in the 20th century, we principally speak of conventionalities. Of course, many of us do not like it. I am sometimes behaving differently because I don't want to apply with certain rules, like my son does, who is autistic because he has his own rules. However, the 20th century instance that made a revolution in the linguistics of science imposes the conventionality of matters. It is for this reason that I say yes. Other people's remarks are in terms of the relatedness of the natural science definitions. The natural science are what Aristotle used to say, what Plato, what Boethius, John Posinot used to say as doctrina signorum about the science, the signifier and the signifier, etc. My answer is more yes than no. As far as the complex situation of semiotic function, I have uh, metaphorically related to it. I mean, 1993, Semiotics of Passions by Greimas and Fontani, and Erotarasti. Why do I say this? Because not only one meaning can be extracted. By complex semiotic function, I mean something that is not visible to the semiotician at once, something that has to be processed. I remember when Eco was very young, one lecture in YouTube in Italian, he used to explain to the general audience what is semiotics. He took this pack of cigarettes and took one, and he said, this is not semiotics, but semiotics is you smoke the cigarettes or if you put it here. So the functionality, the cognition. And that is the basic semiotic function. The complex is if I say that this cigarette is something else. because I don't see it, I don't visualize it, I refer it. And you know that we have, as human being, in the phases of our consciousness development, our referential status, which concurs, of course, with Roman Jakobson's linguistic functions. I see one question from Mustafa Saraja Hoja, whom I know.
Yes, if
Can
you want, I can read it.
Yeah. Yes, I read it.
Can
Yes, please.
Echo's open book approach be evaluated in terms of meaning, context, and polyphony?
Yes, for the following reason. Because meaning, like I said, can be interpreted. Context is the encyclopedic knowledge that Echo talks about. How shall I make a text if I don't have a context? I have to be contextualized everywhere I go.
It is about life.
Of course. So each sort of living phenomena of Lebenswelt, as John Dewey says, has its context. And I cannot say that I didn't want to make a mistake. No, I deliberately make a mistake. And that is a consciousness, psychological status, of course. Of course, also polyphony. Does the professor mean in music or in something else? Of course, in every term of the text seeing of the its relatedness with the context itself.
Maybe it is about multifaceted.
Multi-phased interpretation, yes.
Multiform.
It is because each of one us can interpret it differently. It is a part of opera aperta, the indetermination of the work of art. He thinks, even from Dante Alighieri in Divina Commedia, this interpretation started, but mostly in the modern and postmodern philosophy, of course, and artistic writing such as James Joyce, Henry James, Italo Calvino, who was Umberto Eco's friend, etc. One more question.
Yes, we have one more question. Can we benefit from Umberto Eco's approach to semiotics in translation studies?
Of course. I don't know when I left that book. Tradurre, dire la stessa cosa. Translation, saying the same things. Of course. Unfortunately, I don't have it with me, that book on the moment. It's somewhere in my library, because I have Umberto Eco in many languages. I like him so much, so maybe in 20 languages I have his books. Yes, of course. So this
What's
book.
your suggestion? Or what
My suggestion is to read this book on the semiotics of translation. My friend from Thessaloniki, Evangelos Koudis, also is concerned with the semiotics of translation. The big professor from the University of Bari in Italy, Susan Pertini and Augusto Ponzio, are, I think, the best experts for the semiotics translation. Of course.
Thank you so
no
much.
question about that. Yes.
I have another question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
You said information becomes a message only when it is appropriately encoded.
Yes.
Is it possible for you to elaborate this? Can you give us some example?
Yes.
To make it solid in our minds.
Yes.
Maybe we can talk about examples to
Yes.
make it solid.
Well, the information is, as Umberto says, everything that is in a permanent movement. How do we conceptualize that? It's either a verbal phenomenon, it's either a technological phenomenon, or of which other nature. Information becomes a semiotic information when we want to process it. So it is encoded when I give to its meaning. I see a smoke outside, I think somebody is smoking, natural science phenomena. But there might be a fire outside. Then when I see it, actually, I visualize it as the icon according to Charles Sanders Peirce. So the information is understood in many of its underprints. And in 1968, Umberto Eco, in his La struttura assente, made the distinguishability between information in other fields and the semiotic information. I hope I gave my answer to you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
We have another question.
Of course.
Good evening again. I have a question to dear Buyar Hoja. based on what you have told us so far, can we say that Eco's perception of semiotics is largely related to verbal signs
Definitely yes. Verbal
because of movement or action?
verbal, of course. I wouldn't say really action, because in order to activate actions in semiotics, I think Aldiger Julian Greymas, who has been in Turkey, I have information of that, uh, talked about the subjects actionalizing, actioning in semiotics. Rather, I would say verbal in terms of texts, not what we understand as an interpersonal sort of communication. Perception, yes, because it belongs to medieval philosophy. And not so much of perception, because it analyzes phenomena. But in order to analyze them and see them, you have to cognize them. In order to make semiotic functions, you have to unite both terms which are talking about, either verbalities, artistic text, etc., whatever might be the connection between the two. I
Thank
hope I was clear. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. We have another question in
Yeah.
related to this. I think she speak the previous sentence. Can we link Eco's perception of semiotics to visual semiotics in terms of encoding and decoding?
Yes and no. Yes, because the sign can be divided according to Charles Sanders Peirce in three components. So when we speak of the icon, we have to visualize things. In that case, situation perception, I would say, will not suffice, because you have to see its function. What does it functionalize to? However, in terms of encoding and decoding, I wouldn't say so, because encoding and decoding is precisely given by communicational theories. It's not really a semiotic terms. Even if you remember, Roman Jakobson's first model of communication is based on that. He says, I use this term not for the semiotic model, but for the communicational model. So it is exclusive somehow, except for the definition of the sign. I hope I was clear. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. How do you think about postmodernism and semiotic relations for Umberto Eco? I think
Yeah,
Umberto Eco theory is very suitable for postmodernism, right?
of course, he was a postmodernist. Even
Yes.
John Dewey called Charles Sanders postmodernist. So what was
Yes.
uh,
It's a science.
after? Yes, after Saussurean times, he called it postmodernism. Why? Because, how shall I say, he analyzed artistic theories. Because in his novels, and you might have noticed better than me, he says that the Middle Ages were not so dark as humanity thought them of. They killed people like Galileo Galilei, etc., because they told the truth to the world. He mixes historical documents with the present and the future. That is why I respect very much also the contribution of John Dewey. He says semiotics analyzes the past. We are sure about that. Foresees the future. What does it say about this moment as we talk about the present? So it is a philosophical question. Of course, Umberto Eco was able to foresee, I would say, new coming semiotic paradigms in that sense of the word. Yeah.
Thank you very much, dear Professor Buyar Hoca. I think it was very productive, informative, and understandable presentation. If you want to continue, we can continue, but we don't have any more questions.
No, I
If you
think
have
I
to say
have had the
something.
honor of being a part of you. What remains to me is to thank you all so much for the honor you have done to me. Uh, I hope that in the future, your channel and your Türkiye Gösterce Bilim Çevresi will of course gather so many semioticians out of the globe. We have become so many in the last times, and this is, I am very, very happy about this. What I have seen these last years, that uh, the diversity, the multifariousness of our teachers, professors speaking about semiotics has become so fruitful from each and every aspect of the world, that semiotics is not anymore a part of such paradigms that were, let's say, some 20 years ago when I was a beginner. So it is a very, very positive development in this sense of the word.
Thank you so
But
much.
once again tekrar teşekkürler. Yeni başarılar, yeni yayınlar diliyorum. Herkese hoşça kalın. Çok teşekkür ederim.
Teşekkürler. Bu arada Tarasti de buradaydı. Daha önce sanırım geçen
Görmedim.
yıl önce o zaman bu existential semiotik arasında hakkında konuştuk.
Biliyorum zaten bir kere gördüm diye. O bana çok yardımcı oldu. Benim cüster cebilim zaten ondan geldi.
Evet. Çok
Yine teşekkür ederim.
Çok teşekkür ederim. Çok verimli ve çok bilgilendirici bir sunumdu. Umarım izleyiciler için de öyle olmuştur ve öyle olduğunu düşünüyorum ben. Çok teşekkür ederim ve umarım sizi tekrar burada görürüz bu yayınlarda.
Çok teşekkür ederim. Türkçemle lütfen kusura bakmayın.
Yok,
İyi akşamlar.
Türkçeniz çok iyi. Bence seyircilerimiz de öyle düşünecektir. İyi
Hoşça
akşamlar.
kalın. Teşekkürler.
Görüşmek üzere. İyi akşamlar.
Görüşmek üzere.